Hello everybody, I'm KC, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About. And welcome back to Doctor Whooves Month. And this time we're going to conclude Doctor Whooves Month with a review of the biggest Doctor Who's event that has ever been produced. Except for when he was actually in the show in Slice of Life, but you know what I mean, Wrong Way Backwards. Wrong Way Backwards is a massive crossover event between Doctor Who's an Assistant and Doctor Who's Adventures, paying homage to the multi-Doctor stories that have become a staple of big events in the Doctor Who franchise. For better or for worse. But the thing about this crossover is that it was pretty early in these shows' runs. Neither show is a year old by this point, so considering that this story makes up a grand total of 6 videos and over 3 hours of content, I can only imagine what a massive undertaking this episode was. And because it's such a huge story, it deserved a video all its own. So I'm going to try my best to go in order here and give you a good look at this massive project, which means there will be spoilers, so consider yourself warned. Also, again, there aren't many images in these videos, so while there is some art for this episode, and I will try to contribute a little bit, this video wouldn't get done until May if I put in all of the artwork I would like to, and I'm already very behind on this as it is. But I'll try my best to work with what I've got. Because you can see the length of this video. I got a lot of things to say about this. Part 1 has a similar premise on both sides. The doctors and their companions come across a strange cryptic cat who the doctors figure out isn't from this universe, so they try to catch it before it does too much harm. Both groups are lured in the Everfree Forest, where each doctor is struck by a beam of light. And once you hear the sound of a very familiar glow, you'd think for a second that these shows would be cruel enough to take away these incarnations just when we were getting to know them, but instead of regenerating, the doctors switch places, winding up trapped in the other's universe. So now they have to figure out how to get back to their own universes and save the multiverse, while Twilight and Ditzy have to learn how to work with a stranger with a familiar face. Right off the bat, this is an excellent premise, and it has a ton of potential that they managed to fulfill. So let's see how these 4 handle this situation. But for the sake of clarity, like the story does, I'm going to refer to Assistant's Doctor as Time Turner and Adventures Doctor as Clockwork, because calling them both the Doctor is going to get very confusing very quickly. On Twilight's end of things, Time Turner figures out what happened pretty quickly and just rolls with it, not really feeling the urgency of the situation, and instead wants to explore this new universe with his typical brand of ADD enthusiasm, while Twilight wants to fix this as soon as possible. Meanwhile, on Ditzy's side, she is just as confused as Twilight, but she gets hurt really quickly by the fact that her friend doesn't recognize her. Clockwork gets so wrapped up in gathering information to find out what happened that it takes him a while to realize how upset Ditzy is. Which is pretty much the same thing he did when he met Twilight, so points for consistency. But Clockwork slows down once he puts the pieces together and explains to Ditzy what happened. Ditzy's still uncomfortable around him, but she follows along to get Time Turner back. Also, I'm sure this was a coincidence, but this first encounter comes at a moment that would be echoed many months later by yet another familiar face.
Doctor, it's me!
Hello, Minnie. That's a rather confusing name. I don't like it.
Oh yeah, man, his name is Me. Me. What an unfortunate name.
This part has one of my favorite things about this story, how the characters handle this situation and all of the conflict that it brings. I mentioned before that each of these doctors has an excellent dynamic and friendship with their respective companions, but because Time Turner and Clockwork are so drastically different, they aren't as compatible with the other's companion. Because not only are the doctors vastly different in personality, so are their companions. The very analytical Twilight doesn't work well with Time Turner, who, even though he is very intelligent, can't sit still long enough to work out a problem with Twilight. He thinks he's got the situation under control, so instead of figuring out how to solve this universe-shattering problem, he instead hangs out with Pinky, which is comedy gold and the best scene in this part, which is really a shame because we're never going to see them together again. On Clockwork's end, Ditzy doesn't want to work with him at all. She just wants to get Time Turner back first and foremost, while Clockwork tries to get her to fix the universe-shattering problem, and then Time Turner will come back. But Clockwork's not used to working with such an emotional companion, and Ditzy is being very sensitive right now, even refusing to call him the Doctor. Clockwork does try his best to accommodate Ditzy's feelings while trying to solve the problem they find themselves in, and they do come to an understanding better than Twilight and Time Turner do, but it takes some dangerous events to get to that point, which is pretty typical for Doctor Who, so again, points for consistency. Eventually, each group finds themselves at the library, and this This is one of my favorite moments on both ends, where the doctors meet the alternate versions of their companions. On Time Turner's end, Derpy delivers a package and he immediately mistakes her for his Derpy. And the realization that it's not hits him hard. So hard that his entire attitude turns around, probably from being hit with the realization of what's actually at stake, and he becomes much more serious. But pretty soon, we'll be wishing he was still being silly, and we'll get to that later. But I also really like how they handle the misunderstanding on Clockwork's end. Clockwork passes out in front of the library after avoiding getting pulled into the void, and wakes up to find Twilight there. This of course fools Clockwork into thinking that this is his Twilight, and he somehow got pulled back. This was a clever move that may have even fooled a couple of audience members at first, and I don't think Clockwork would have mistaken this Twilight for his if that didn't happen. He knows better. But having that one bit of hope dashed away makes Clockwork realize just how much he really does miss Twilight, something he hadn't really thought of before that point. And I think that helps him realize a bit of what Ditzy is going through, and he approaches the situation they're in with a new determination as they discover a new piece of the puzzle. Both groups find a book with a poem that tells of a being called the Jabberwock that will consume the universe at any cost. Wait a minute. This sounds familiar. Yeah, I know what they're referencing, but it's not that. This whole setup, I've heard it before. A somewhat similar story.
Zagreus sits inside your head.
In another audio drama.
Zagreus lives among the dead.
With more than one doctor.
Zagreus sees you in your bed.
A long time ago.
And eats you when you're sleeping.
This is Zagreus, the big Finnish audio drama from 2003 that marked Doctor Who's 40th anniversary. Huh. That's a pretty obscure callback. It's not a bad story to draw inspiration from, I suppose, but the similarities are staggering. A multi-doctor audio drama with Alice in Wonderland elements and a being that threatens multiple universes, right down to the creepy cryptic poem that tells the tale of the beast. Pierce or Squeak must have really liked Zagreus to include this many throwbacks to it. Wait, what? Well, that's embarrassing. Never mind then, let's move on. So now that they have a better idea of what they're up against, each duo decides to head off to the TARDIS. Time Turner gave Ditzy a key to the TARDIS in a previous episode, which reminds Clockwork that he hasn't given Twilight one yet. Which was a nice way to show that despite Clockwork and Twilight being good friends, they aren't as close as Ditzy and Time Turner are yet. But hey, Amy and Rory never got a key, so make of that what you will. But this means that Twilight and Time Turner can't get into the TARDIS. Except they do. Somehow. No, wait, hang on. How did they get in? This is probably a nitpick on my part, but this has bugged me for a while. Time Turner can't use the key to his TARDIS, he says they can't get in, and then the door opens. He definitely didn't snap his fingers, so what gives? Well, never mind, I guess. It's never brought up again. Thankfully, due to that mysterious cat messing with Clockwork and Ditzy inside the TARDIS, the four of them are now able to talk to each other, and with all of them working together, they discover that they have different poems, and they need to be put together. Can I just say that this is really clever? I mean, it's tough enough to write a cryptic poem in the first place, but to then break it up into two parts that are somewhat coherent, and then make it sound well when they're put back together? I have to applaud that. That was impressive of Pierce and Squeak. So now that they understand the poem better, each group has to part again and head to the Everfree Forest, where there is some action and adventure, but mostly conversation. Some time for Twilight and Ditzy to get to know their new doctors a bit better. On Twilight's end, things are still a little messy. There are disagreements on how to properly move forward in this situation, with some questionable actions by Time Turner I'll dive more into later, but it's not all contempt. There's a moment I really like where Time Turner tells Twilight about how he saw the defeat of Nightmare Moon in his universe. He goes on about how much he admired Twilight's determination in that situation, and how amazed he was at what her and her friends did. I really like that they included this. Time Turner's time with Twilight would have been a lot more sour without this, but instead he opens up about how much he learned about Equestria from that experience. And Twilight appreciates that. On Ditzy's side, Clockwork recounts how he met Twilight, but Ditzy sees that he's still sad and wants to get him to smile. With a song. Were you really expecting anything else? It's a really cute song, but some fans have called horse droppings on the fact that Clockwork finds her breaking into song so weird, since he has sung in Adventures before. But this actually makes sense. Clockwork has sung twice by this point, once on stage as a distraction, and again with a lullaby. Both of these songs can be seen as diegetic, which basically means that they are musical numbers that take place in a realistic way or on an in-universe stage. Ditsy's song is non-diegetic. It's more symbolic, the musical accompaniment doesn't come from anywhere in-universe, and for comedic effect, Ditsy didn't even register it as a song, so it makes sense why Clockwork finds it so strange. This is also how Fluttershy could have stage fright in Philly Vanilli, even though she's sung in the show before, by the way, since all of those instances were non-diegetic as well. But back to the story. They run into one of the Jabberwock agents, and thanks to a very clever plan on Clockwork's part, they manage to shrink the lizard with Poison Joke. They take the little guy along with them, but on their way to the castle, Ditsy gets pulled out of her universe and is replaced with Time Turner, now face to face with his grumpy counterpart. But not only did Time Turner wind up in this universe, so did a Jabberwock agent, but this one isn't as intact as Clockwork's is. This was the first part I saw, so when the creature appears alongside Time Turner, with its head cut off, I was just as shocked as Clockwork was. So yeah, remember all that stuff I said about Time Turner taking this situation more seriously? Well, he took it a little too seriously, and his fears got the better of him. He became much more impatient when faced with obstacles, and therefore more violent. He tried to outrun the thing like Clockwork did, but when that didn't work, he went with the quick solution and gouged its eyes out.
A family picture.
Twilight keeps trying to understand why he did that, but Time Turner doesn't want to hear it. He just wants to keep going and get back to his universe as soon as possible. He may respect Twilight, but he still thinks he knows what's best, and he's so frustrated that he's not willing to listen to any pony else. But even blind, the creature managed to find them again, and before Time Turner gets switched with Ditsy, he cuts the creature's head off to stop it once and for all.
A family picture. Oh my god. Oh, this is nothing. Oh no. Oh my god. Oh.
Once Clockwork discovers what he did and why, it leads to a debate between the two doctors. This is, by far, the highlight of the episode. This entire conversation could make for a video on its own, but instead it's probably going to be the main reason why this video is so long. The Doctor's morality is a very complex thing, especially in the new series. Remember this?
Good men don't need rules. Today is not the day to find out why I have so many.
Time Turner tries to defend what he did and his approach to this whole situation. He justifies his actions by saying less people will get hurt in the long run, which, looking back on it, has been pretty obvious through his run so far. He gave most of his enemies one warning and then took the direct approach. Not as direct as what he did here, and lives were saved before, but it doesn't change the fact that behind his giant smiles, this is a very vengeful Doctor, and this difficult situation has that bubbling to the surface to the point that most of the fun and laughs are gone until the climax. This episode, more than any other so far, shows just what Time Turner is really like, how much he tries to hide what he's truly capable of and what he's most afraid of doing under his silly facade, whether he realizes it or not. And who'd have thought that a fan project would have gotten to this observation almost a year before the show did?
Do you have to talk like children? What is it that makes you so ashamed of being a grown-up?
Clockwork, on the other hand, takes a different approach. He's fully aware of what he's capable of and how ashamed he is of what he's done in his long life. And while he knows he can't change what he's done or who he's become, he tries to live by an example, to carry on the lessons he's learned from his friends and companions and embrace that spirit as much as he can. There's a review of The Parting of the Ways by Mr. TARDIS, where he makes the observation that the Ninth Doctor's biggest contribution to his run of episodes was inspiring ordinary people to save the world. And that line of thinking could very easily be applied to Clockwork. Think about it. How has Clockwork saved the day during his time in Equestria? Certainly not on his own. In number 12, Twilight worked with him to save the day. In Pony of the Opera, Dorian rises to the occasion and dissipates the Will-O-Wisps. In Shadows of the Lunar Republic, it's Luna. Clockwork was trapped through most of that final battle. But what Clockwork has contributed is a viewpoint, helping ponies who were unable or unwilling to stand up and fight accomplish great things, to try and make others better in the way his friends have made him better. This back and forth really doesn't show how different they are. It shows how similar they are, but that they choose to deal with that in different ways. Both of them are very interesting perspective on the character when you really think about it, and it's a conversation I could very easily see take place on Doctor Who. I would commend Pearson Squeak for this, but apparently a good chunk of this discussion was improvised by the actors. I don't know if they were given an outline to work with, or if they both just came up with all this from scratch, but whatever the case, it's a highlight for both series. Say what you want about each Doctor, but it's clear that not only do the two showrunners have an excellent understanding of this iconic character, but so do Jamjar and Keiko and Gilly, delivering the best performances both of them have turned in as the Doctor so far. It's especially memorable when you consider that this was Keiko's penultimate performance as a Doctor, unless you count the Love Struck Derpy dubs, but that gets into a completely different continuity, and that's not what we're talking about. Point is, it's absolutely marvelous, it's the best scene in the episode, everyone loves it, and it does not feel like it goes on for over 10 minutes, which is remarkable in an audio drama, but this took almost 2 pages of discussion, and we've still got over half an hour of content to get through, so let's move on. While that amazing scene is going on, Twilight and Ditzy are together and on their own mission. And I gotta say, for all of the confrontation that's been going on in the story, it's nice to see these two get along so quickly despite how different they are. And it gives us everyone's favorite multiple companion pastime, poking fun at the Doctor.
And don't forget to bring a mysterious stick that I can talk to and poke things with.
Oh, certainly not the mysterious stick. Love a mysterious stick.
But they also talk a bit more seriously about their doctors, and this was really where we first realized that Ditzy sees more to a pony than she lets on. How much she sees through not just what Time Turner hides, but what Clockwork hides as well. And I think this whole experience shakes up how Twilight looks at Clockwork, at least a little bit. Not only is there what she's seen through Time Turner that she really didn't like, but what Ditzy says about both of them, how sad and lonely they are, and that's something Twilight hasn't given much thought. It's a good dilemma for Twilight that I really hope is expanded on in future episodes of Adventures. But during this time, the walls between universes become less stable and start to phase into each other. Twilight and Ditzy hear bits and pieces of the Doctors bickering and arguing, while on the Doctor's end of things, there's...
Was that another pony us? Doctor, just how many are there?
Well, if we count YouTube, Tumblr blogs, and who knows how many comics, way more than anyone probably ever thought there would be. Because the walls are getting weaker, the Doctors and companions are reunited, but they don't get long to celebrate as the cats return and the Jabberwock is released. And I gotta give credit to whoever edited the Jabberwock's voice. Yeah, it's a bit tough to understand at times, but this thing sounds incredible, like it really did come from another plane of being, existing in many places at once. I don't know how they got it to sound like that, but it's impressive. And this thing is a pretty frightening villain. The entire first half of the encounter is just a back and forth between our heroes and our villain. The best way I can think to describe it is an unstoppable force meets an immovable object dynamic, with both sides displaying pure determination to stop the other. Kinda like when the Doctor confronted the devil, except better and somehow less ridiculous. But the Jabberwock is pretty convinced that he has them beat once he separates them again, leaving each Doctor alone with their own companion to reflect for a minute. On Time Turner's end, Ditzy calms him down and talks out his fears with him. It's a sweet moment to show how far they've come as a team, and what Time Turner learns here will stick with him as his series goes on. But Twilight and Clockwork ain't got time for talking about their feelings. The walls of the universe get even weaker, so instead they focus on solving the problem at hand together. Well, it's what they do best. With the combined efforts of the two teams and some unexpected help from the cats, they all get back together, but they still have a mean green mother from another dimension to deal with. Luckily, they find the single word in the poem that can seal the Jabberwock away, presumably forever. Cool. I know it's bad, I don't have much to say about the climax of the story, but I really don't. I mean, it's cool to see the two Doctors finally cooperate and work together, but that's it, really. So everything's fixed and our heroes say their goodbyes before going their separate ways, each taking away something from this experience. And it's nice to know that this is an event that won't be forgotten. What we learn about Time Turner and Ditzy is carried on and explored more throughout future episodes of Assistant, and Adventures... well, I'm not sure. Because according to Pony in a Box, the events of Runway Backwards take place canonically after Bells of Fate, so it'll be a while before we see how Twilight and Clockwork handle things going forward. Well, at least Clockwork learned to laugh more, which is a nice note to end this colossal episode on. Overall, Runway Backwards is a remarkable piece of fan work. They found an excellent scenario to bring these two universes together and fulfill the potential to the fullest. Sure, there are a couple of hiccups plot-wise, but nothing that's even close to being a deal-breaker. The story is entertaining and suspenseful, the characters are constantly engaging through the comedic and dramatic, the performances are arguably the best in either series, the production value is incredible given how large of a project this was, and the fact that they pulled this off with such amazing results is commendable in its own right. This shows the best of what both shows are capable of, and I'm glad that I managed to find Doctor Whooves right in the middle of this special. Not just for the special, but for how much these series got me invested in Doctor Who and My Little Pony. I checked out Matt Smith's run shortly after finding these shows, and whenever they'd reference an episode of MLP, I'd find the actual episode to see what they were talking about. Doctor Who's managed to get me into both of these shows just in time for the biggest moments in both of them, and to fully understand their weight. And the fact that Doctor Who's 50th anniversary special came out the same day as the premiere of Princess Twilight Sparkle was practically poetic to me. So I want to wrap up Doctor Who's month by taking a moment to personally thank Squeak the Rider Pony, Pierce Smolder, Keiko and Gilly, Jam Jar, Jester Dorama, Lauren Goodnight, Pegasus Brill, and absolutely anyone else who has ever worked on either of these series who might possibly be watching, for making something so wonderful that it got me to join two fandoms at once. And I wouldn't have had it any other way. Oh boy, that came out long, but I wanted to do it justice. Thank you guys for coming along with me on this multi-fandom journey, and if you'll excuse me, I have some things to take care of before Doctor Who and My Little Pony come back, at the same time. Again? Huh, curious. Until then, avante, onwards and upwards, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.